Hey everybody, Ancient History Criticisms here. My name is Andrew. Welcome to the channel where we will be discussing ancient mysteries and critiquing the mainstream narrative of history. And we're going to see what the independent researchers have to say. So a little bit about myself. I have a bachelor's degree in fine arts from the University of Kentucky. I'm a printmaker. And I studied historical printmaking methods, woodblock printing, lithography, plate etching, basically everything from the cylinder seals all the way up to the printing press. I also studied a little Mesoamerican archaeology, and I also studied a little historical Asian art like ceramics and paintings and woodblock prints, everything from the Jomon period, almost to modern times. And I've also always had just a fascination with ancient mysteries. Ever since I saw the In Search Of series with Leonard Nimoy when I was a little kid, the Great Pyramid and Machu Picchu and Easter Island, I was hooked. I wanted to know more, and my professors and my teachers never really could give me any satisfactory answers, so in my spare time, I became an independent researcher, like a lot of other people have. So, in this video, I just want to introduce everyone to some of the channels that I subscribe to. They're all related to ancient history in one way or the other, and I think they all have something important to say, or a good perspective, or a good hypothesis about something. And most of them are all fellow independent researchers like myself. So I've amassed this collection from channels over, many years. This isn't just overnight. I've had to look into this for many years to be able to weed out all the sensationalists and the flagrant liars, basically. I won't even talk about some of those channels, but we might get into that in another video. But all these guys, they all contribute something to the discussion. They all have a good insight, and some of them you may know, some of them you may not. Some of them you might think are kooks, other ones you might think are pretty orthodox, but I think each one has something to add. So there we go. Okay, full disclosure, I only know these guys through YouTube, most of them, so I'm only going to base my assessments of their research off of what they've presented on YouTube. Like I say, a lot of these guys are independent researchers that I know by name. Some of the other ones I might not know their names. They might be affiliations, people who, like the LAH.RU, the Russians, we'll call them the Russians. Zohar Stargate, another, it's a presentation channel. I don't really know where they're based out of or who is behind them, but they present a lot of good documentaries and presentations and lectures, so we're going to include them. But we'll start up here with Vlad9VT. Vlad is based out of Ukraine. He's an independent researcher. He does really good, simple slideshow videos with no talking, just text, but very informative. And he kind of just lets you see the evidence for yourself, and you just kind of look at the sites. He'll show you historical pictures all the way up to modern day, the most present pictures of sites. A lot of sites you've heard of, a lot of sites you've never heard of. Vlad has been a wealth of knowledge and really, really good insight. Just sitting back and watching his slideshow videos has opened my eyes to all kinds of sites that I never knew existed, and some of these I never knew could be connected to others. So, highly recommend Vlad. Graham Hancock, not much needs to be said about Graham Hancock that hasn't already been said, isn't already all over YouTube. Graham is a great independent researcher, and we should all follow in his model. And he doesn't put out much on YouTube, but every now and then he does put up a video, and he always has something interesting to say. Matter of fact, he's about to come out with a new book on ancient North America, which I'm very, very interested to hear more about. Next, Magical Egypt. This is just a collaboration collection channel for John Anthony West's work, Magical Egypt, the series. It's more, I just put it here for reference. It's really good to go back and listen to John Anthony West talk about the symbolism and the mythology of ancient Egypt, and there's really good information in there. Sylvie at New Earth. Some people just know her as the New Earth lady. She's from Bulgaria, I believe. Sylvie is another independent researcher, just looking into the ancient sites from her own perspective. She has some really good insights and makes some really good videos. I highly recommend a series called When the Survivors of Atlantis Wake Up. Some of the things I don't agree with her with. Other things I admit I just do not know enough to base an opinion on. But she always has a very unique, very well-researched perspective on things. Highly recommend New Earth as well. Crow House. Crow House is Max Egan. He's based out of Australia. Not connected to ancient history directly, but he's also one who is interested in the alternative ancient narrative. Basically, he also believes that we have been lied to about our ancient past, and that there is more of a story to be told. A lot of his videos are more motivational, inspirational. Sometimes you might not think they're very inspirational, but he talks more about current events, things that are going on in the world today, and kind of how to get through the way we have formed our civilization. He has a series called Surviving the Matrix that's really good, and just really good background food for thought just to listen to and just, to contemplate and mull over and roll around in your head. So highly recommend Max. Now, Zohar Stargate, I mentioned them. I really don't know much about these guys, but they put out really good lectures from all around YouTube, from other people, basically. None of it's really their own. I don't know what kind of licenses for sharing that these guys have, but they share a lot of Brian Forrester's work, Graham Hancock's work, some of their convention lectures, things that were maybe filmed that never made it to YouTube directly, maybe some things that may have been behind a paywall. I don't understand all the copyright stuff involved, but whatever they're doing, they're uploading a lot of really good lectures from a lot of the independent researchers. So if you want to have your fingers on the pulse of what everybody's been saying, I would highly recommend at least subscribing to this version of their channel. They have other versions that go into aliens and other topics that might be less researched. So if you want to go down that rabbit hole, you can, but I believe this channel is the one that just presents most of the ancient alternative history hypothesis. Next up is Sacred Geometry Decoded, SGD. He is based out of England. Really like this guy. Doesn't have many subscribers, but his videos are very, very well put together. He puts a lot of effort into his videos and shows the geometry, the math, and the architecture, and kind of debunks a lot of the sensationalist theories that are out there involving some of the structures, the ancient structures, their alignments, and their more the magical properties of how they were put together. So he's really good to kind of get a ground level, a base level, if say you got too far down a rabbit hole. So I would highly recommend him. Next is Phenomenal Travel Videos. This is Praveen Mohan from India. You will never find another Indian alternative independent researcher who, let alone one who goes to the sites and videotapes and GoPros and really he's the only perspective we have of ancient India. So I really highly recommend Phenomenal Travel Videos. I might not always agree with some of his proposals. I think he believes that some of these things are maybe alien involved, but he's also open to the ancient high civilization hypothesis. So I highly recommend Praveen. Next up is the LAH.RU crew. These are the guys out of Russia. I've always heard of them called the Russian independent researchers. I really don't know any of them by name or what their affiliations are, but I've recently subscribed to them and tried to go through some of their videos that have subtitles. I've added some of the better ones to my playlist. They've been doing really good work for years, kind of in the background. No one's really paid too much attention to what they're doing, but they've been able to do some really good work. They've been going to a lot of sites and getting a lot of footage that a lot of people don't get. As a matter of fact, they've got some really good footage of the well shaft and grotto of the Great Pyramid. Matter of fact, the only pictures that are in color in existence happened because of this crew. So highly recommend these guys. Now, next up, the Great Giza Pyramid. This guy is a really good independent researcher. He is looking at the function of the Great Pyramid. He's looking at it as a structure with no symbolism attached to it. He's only focusing on the function. And I'm really impressed by his observations, his attention to detail of the structure. I'm not informed enough to make an opinion on what his conclusions have been, but I think that his research is going somewhere and that he has a lot to add to the discussion. And there's nobody on YouTube that has a better knowledge of the structure of the Great Pyramid than he does. So I highly recommend subscribing to him. He will comment back to you if you talk to him. As a matter of fact, he encourages you to. Next up is Robert Seffer at Atlantean Gardens. Unfortunately, this independent researcher does not comment on YouTube. He doesn't really get back to you, but there's a really good reason for this. Robert tends to delve into a lot of taboo and unorthodox, maybe frowned upon subjects in ancient history. The swastika, for example. So you have to look at his research analytically. A lot of people get very emotional in those subject matter, but he's a very grounded researcher, and I would definitely recommend him for investigating some more taboo subjects that a lot of people would much rather not talk about, but they are worth talking about. So look into him. Next is the Thunderbolts Project. These guys, while not directly related to ancient history, or maybe more so than any other channel here, these guys basically are the Electric Universe crew. These are the guys who believe the universe is electric, and that our solar system was created through electrical forces, and they are what hold our solar system and galaxies and universe together. They have a lot to say about our ancient history. A lot of it is really out there stuff. Purple dawn of creation, Saturn-oriented solar systems, electrical scarring on Mars. There's a lot of out there stuff, but they have really, really interesting connections with ancient petroglyphic art, which is their symbol here. So I would highly recommend them if you want a really technical, analytical, scientific approach to interpreting the ancient mythologies and the ancient symbolism of our ancestors, and how it all ties into the dynamics and inner workings of our solar system and our galaxies and our universe. Next up is Randall Carlson, pretty famous, Geocosmic Rex. He's been on Joe Rogan's podcast along with Graham Hancock. He is the independent researcher looking into the Great Flood and some of the evidence for it up in the Pacific Northwest of America. Very, very good, grounded, scientific-based research. He's been doing this for a long time. He's very well read and very knowledgeable on the subject. You won't find anybody else on YouTube that goes into the ancient catastrophe hypothesis with such an analytical, scientific mind. Just really, really, really good information that is almost undefeatable. So highly recommend it. Puka J Productions. These guys have made really good videos in the past. Unfortunately, they haven't been making many videos lately, but these guys have put out some really good videos of their trips to a lot of ancient sites, a lot of ancient Egyptian sites. And they've exposed a lot of details and features that a lot of other people have completely missed. And they've done some interviews, I believe one with Brian Forrester. I really hope to hear more from these guys soon. They're really, really good independent researchers. Next up, Jimmy at Bright Insight. He might be one of the more famous YouTubers on my list. He kind of just popped up recently. He's been doing really good work lately. I have to commend him. I will say a lot of his videos are rather surface level, or just enough information for the layperson, for the person that's just getting into ancient mysteries that might not know too much or might not know all the details on a site. He gives you a nice good chunk of information that you can take and then research yourself further. So if you want someone who makes really good, insightful, thought-provoking videos, but you don't know much about some of these ancient histories, I would definitely recommend starting out with Bright Insight. Next up, Guide of Egypt. This is Mohammed Ibrahim. He and Yusuf Awiyan are the two probably most famous guides in Egypt. These guys are the ones who have shown us the underground tunnels and the systems of chambers that go underneath the Giza complex and many other places. They both have visited the Serapeum with Brian Forster and Puka J and a few other guys. These guys are really doing good work over in Egypt to help expose the truth. I don't know what their what kind of legal trouble they get into doing some of the things they do, but they really put their necks out and help show that ancient Egypt is a lot older than what the Egyptologists tell us. Megalithomania. This is Hugh Newman and I'm assuming maybe a crew of a few people, but basically Hugh Newman from the UK. Hugh is a really good independent researcher who looks into giants, among other topics. He looks at the ancient megalithic sites, polygonal walls, even just sites like Baalbek and the pyramids and more famous sites. He's just a really good researcher that films a lot of the sites on his own and comes up with his own hypotheses about things. I do find the hypothesis of giants fascinating. I think there might be something to that. I don't claim to know all the facts, and I don't claim to say that these giants were these 8-foot or 9-foot giants. I don't know if they're that big, but I think there's something to tall people in our ancient past. There seems to be evidence that supports that. So definitely recommend Hugh Newman. Next up is Brian Forster, another pretty famous YouTuber. A lot of people know Brian. His videos have spread pretty far and wide. And he has gone pretty far and wide. He has been to a lot of ancient sites on his own and filmed them on his own. Matter of fact, he's been going back to a lot of the sites again with better camera equipment just to get better footage. Brian is a great independent researcher. He's writing his books. He writes a book basically whenever he researches a topic and finds out there isn't a book on it. So he's prolific in his book writing, but it's because the topics don't have authors. So highly recommend Brian. He's always putting out good work. I don't actually own any of his books, but you can get a really good sense of what he has to present through his online content. Next up is Michael at the Lost History channel, the Kepler Telescope channel. Michael, I believe he is based out of England. I'm not sure exactly. He has a narrator for his videos, Buzzweaver. It's kind of an interesting effect. But Michael is just another independent researcher like the rest of us, and he comes up with really good hypotheses for things. Some of them are a little out there, but other ones are pretty grounded. He investigates some topics that other people have completely ignored. Stones in Scotland, I believe, and I think just recently a canal system in Egypt that's pretty fascinating. If he's correct, it's pretty impressive. But just another independent researcher doing really good work on his own. Highly recommend subscribing to him. Next up is Wise Up. Wise Up is based out of England. Wise Up just does really good informative slideshow videos. Sometimes he'll narrate, but he just kind of shows you the sites, and sometimes he'll point out some details that maybe other people overlooked. He really shows you some of these more anomalous features of the sites, like square holes, and he introduced me to the bevel blocks, some of the more molded looking stones, a lot of more of the anomalous features of these sites, and he comes to his own conclusions and proposes his own questions, and he's really good, thought-provoking channel. You might not always agree with him. I don't claim to always agree with him, and I don't claim to always understand some of the concepts, but I think his research is going somewhere also, and he has some really good insights to add if we just have the patience and the eyes to see, as I've said. Next up is Charles Koss. He's an independent researcher out of Australia. He has a PhD. I believe it's an assorted PhD. He just did a video of his own explaining his formal background. I know he knows a lot about ancient medieval England and more, much more. You'll have to check his library video. I'm going to post that in my playlist tab. You should check it out. I think it's one of the most impressive collections of books on ancient history that I've ever seen. So I highly recommend subscribing to Charles. He has a book of his own out called Confessions of the Gods. It's on the ancient Vedic texts and the Mahabharata. Basically, the hypothesis of ancient high lost technology and the ancient high civilization as foretold through the Vedic texts. So if you're interested in that, I find it very compelling. If you're interested in that kind of stuff, I would highly recommend Charles. He also has a very good independent, unique point of view on a lot of things. So he comes out of left field with some concepts, and sometimes they're kind of hard to stomach, but then you think it over for a few days, and then you go, wow, he really might be onto something. So he's kind of an eccentric lad. I really think he's a little quirky, but I like that about him. It makes him a really unique individual, and I think he's a really earnest researcher and really honest, so I really admire him. Highly recommend him. Matter of fact, I highly recommend this whole last three row. This is my big three, I guess you could say. The first three guys I subscribed to when I started the channel. I've been subscribing to these guys on my other channel, but when I decided to do this formally, these are the first three that I had in mind. So it was Charles, and then next is Ancient Architects, Matt. Matt is based out of England. Matt does his own research. He's independent, and I believe he just does it in his spare time. He has a job and I believe a family and a life outside of this. So he just does this as a pastime, which is really impressive because he does very, very well-produced, well-researched videos. You won't find better, just ground level, level-headed, base research than Ancient Architects. They're usually short videos, but they're really packed with information, and they really get you thinking. You really mull over his ideas in your head, and they stick with you, and they make you think. And then finally, Chuck at CFApps7865, probably one of my favorite YouTubers, and I'm actually stealing his preferred software to make this video because I found it's actually pretty handy. Chuck is a great independent researcher from Las Vegas, Nevada. He has made a series for ancient Egypt about all these unreported and undocumented subterranean underground structures dotted all throughout the Nile Valley, and just really, really impressive research that he's done all on his own, just through like Google Earth and reading the ancient texts. Right now he's doing a really good series on North America, on earthworks and mounds and other strange undocumented structures that no one's really seemed to cover or have been lost to time. So he's really, really good independent researcher. Highly recommend him as well. So that completes my list. If you guys have any more that you want to add, I'm always looking for more researchers. There's probably a few that I need to add still from my other channel that I haven't gone through and picked out. But for now, this is pretty much the bulk of my favorite researchers. And if you're going to be looking into ancient mysteries, these are the guys that you want to start with and go from there. So thanks from Ancient History Criticisms. This is Andrew again. Thank you very much, guys, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.